Devin recently shared this really awesome photo of a garden structure that he put together, and I think it's a really great design, and there's some great techniques in here that I wanted to highlight for everybody else who might want to create a similar structure. And so that's what we're going to do in this video. I'm going to screenshot this here and use the iPad. We're going to break it down, talk about the techniques involved and the different connectors that were used and everything like that. So this whole thing was made with EMT conduit and maker pipe connectors. An EMT conduit is a steel tubing you can get off the shelf at places like Lowe's, Home Depot, different hardware and home improvement stores. And even though it's steel, you don't have to weld it. In fact, you probably shouldn't weld it. That can be pretty dangerous with the chemicals that burn off. But you can cut through it easily with just a handheld tool, and you don't need to weld it because of the maker pipe clamps here. And those are things that we manufacture here in upstate South Carolina, and we ship them all over the country to people who are building projects like this. And there's a wide variety of different parts, but there's really only a few main ones that are used in this, and we'll talk about them as we go through the build. But essentially, there are 8 verticals on this build, and those are just going up from the base here and attached to the garden bed. It's got a really nice set of raised wooden garden beds, which is always cool to see. And you can really adapt this kind of design to if you've got a metal raised bed, if you're using some of the Birdies or the Vigo garden beds. We've seen members of the community use all kinds of different garden beds, even no garden bed at all, and just have a freestanding trellis or garden frame. You can do that too, and there's different techniques. But for this, it's secured to this wooden garden bed, and Devin is utilizing 2-hole straps, which are a really common accessory you can get off the shelf at places like hardware, home improvement stores, same place that you get EMT conduit. And those essentially function where there's a tab that has a hole in it that you can drive a screw through, and then there is a strap that goes around the conduit and then has another a hole on the other side that you can add another screw and bolt. And essentially, that is how Devin secured all of these vertical pieces of conduit. Just a bunch of those 2-hole straps just going around and securing the verticals in place. And there's a vertical back there that we can't see that's kind of hidden by this other one with the angle of the photo. But essentially, all the verticals are attached to the wooden garden bed with that technique, and that's really inexpensive and simple way to make sure that you secure the structure to your bed, which is really important. And then from there, we've got all these verticals going up, and Devin utilized the maker pipe 90-degree connector up here at the top of the verticals in the corners. So there's 4 of these 90-degree connectors, and the way these work is the verticals are running continuously through the connectors. So kind of different than what you might expect with PVC, where the tubing goes into the fitting and then kind of stops. There are connections like that in the maker pipe system, but most of them have what we call a through connection, where the piece of conduit can run continuously through them. And that's what's happening in the middle of this 90-degree connector here. And so that means there's a short stub of conduit sticking up right here through that connection, and we'll highlight why that's important here in a moment. But essentially in the corners, that is what's happening. There's a 90-degree connector, and then the other 2 pieces of conduit come out of this 90, and those do terminate inside the connector. Those don't run continuously through it. And then those are just going all the way to the other side, where you'll find another 90-degree connector in the corner. And then this side terminates in there and then goes down into another fitting that functions similarly, where there's a vertical piece of conduit running continuously through the middle of the connector. But instead of this being a 90-degree kind of corner connection, this is what we call the 180-degree connector, because it has these 2 red pieces of conduit coming out of it at a 180-degree angle. And this works really well if you are extending a frame, kind of adding length while also simultaneously adding a support vertical at the same time. And we're actually going to do a follow-up video on this whole topic later on, and I'll kind of show you guys how that you can put or use 90-degree connectors and 180s or 4-ways to make really easy and modular garden frames. So make sure you're subscribed to see that. Should be coming in the next few weeks. But essentially, he just used a couple of the 180-degree connectors on each side for this technique, for just having that vertical in the middle and then the 2 pipes that terminate. Like I said, just extending the length of the frame while also adding that support vertical. And then down here, we've got more 90-degree connectors in the corners. And that's essentially how you put together this main frame. And we see a lot of builders stop there, just kind of make this rectangular box, and then they can modify that, add trellis netting or add enclosure material or greenhouse plastic, all kinds of stuff you can add to this frame once you have it in place. But Devin didn't stop there. In fact, he did a really cool technique, which I think is really smart and really useful for projects like this. He added an arched roof. And I think this technique is really smart for all different types of builds, where essentially you utilize the fact that you have this through connection here with this piece of conduit sticking all the way through it. And if we erase some of this here, we'll see there is a connector behind this, and that is grabbing onto that short stub of conduit. And this is what we call the coupling, which functions similarly to the electrical couplings that you'll find off the shelf, except this one is made specifically for DIY projects, and it's made so you can join two pieces of conduit together. There's one there that terminates inside, and then there's one on the other side that terminates there. And so what Devin has done is essentially bent these arches, and we have a video tutorial on our YouTube channel on how to bend arches. We have a calculator that you can input the dimensions, and it'll give you all the things you need to know to be able to bend an arch like this. It's kind of tricky because it's a large radius bend, and you just use a handheld pipe and tube bender. It takes a lot of patience and practice, but you can get it and make an awesome project like this. But essentially, instead of trying to incorporate the verticals and that arch all in one piece, because you're kind of limited to the length of the conduit that you can find, which is usually 5 or 10 foot. Instead of trying to make that work and make a really short structure or try to split this in half, essentially he's just using the coupling to add on to this vertical piece and then attach this arch that he bent to the frame. And there's just a coupling on each side here, as we can see, to do that. And that he did the same technique going all the way down just to add those arches all over the frame. And for every set of verticals, he's got an arch going from one side to the other. And then up here, he added a support kind of peak in the middle. And essentially, this is just a maker pipe T connector. We'll erase a little bit so we can see that. And that's just a that's just a connector that allows you to join two pieces of conduit together, where you have the through pipe that runs through the top. Then you have another piece that terminates in the bottom, and that is what this ridge pole is going down and attaching to. And then here's a familiar connector that we already talked about, the 180-degree connector, which it's just kind of flipped over on its side to allow the arch to run through it. And then he's got the ridge pole running down and attaching to each arch, and then continuing to go down, and then it's just basically repeating that process where there's a T connector to cap it off and connect it on this side. And then, of course, you've got all these arches that are just running continuously through the connectors that he's got there. And that's essentially it for this frame. Secure it to the garden bed with the 2-hole straps, use the 90s and 180s to make that basic cube, and then bend the arches and use the couplings to attach those arches, and then reinforce that ridge at the top with just a few connectors that make it really easy. And this is awesome. You can go from here and you can add on, like I said, all kinds of awesome stuff. We've seen trellises in the community, garden enclosures, greenhouses, all kinds of wild stuff, and you can customize these frames exactly how you need for your space based on the dimensions and based on your garden needs and the time of year and all those different things. So this is really cool, Devin. Thanks so much for sharing this idea. We love seeing it. If you have any questions or comments, leave those down below. You can also check out this post and this photo in the description if you'd like as well. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, leave a like and consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.